Welcome to a very hot day in Toronto, but nothing was hotter than the news that OG Anunoby allegedly, supposedly, but definitely is not thrilled with the New York Knicks offer. For those of you who do not know, the new CBA allows that once the NBA season has ended, teams are once again now able to negotiate the next contract with their players. They're not allowed to announce anything, they're not allowed to sign anything. But right now, the New York Knicks can go to OG Anunoby and say, hey, by the way, it's been nice knowing you for the last few months. This is what we're thinking. And OG Anunoby is free to say, not even close, because that's what's about to happen. So allegedly, OG Anunoby is looking to test free agency. Now, those of you who follow this channel know that I made quite a bit of a stir on Raptors Twitter and Knicks Twitter, and I got a lot of hate 5 months ago for creating a video basically saying that this was exactly what was going to happen. All right, and that's why I'm touting my little Robstradamus little name there. Like, there's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot of moving pieces, but there's a few things I think that are going to make this seem. This is not as pipe dreamy as as uh as what you might think. This is not me just trolling the Knicks or, trying to create a rumor just to have something to talk about for the algorithm. This is legit. This is real. Okay. There's a lot of little hints that have been dropped throughout the months. Scotty Barnes going on his little Twitch stream saying, OG and I have been talking a lot lately, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Look, man, like the hints are there. And when it happens, if this happens and it becomes more likely to happen every single passing week, that it becomes more likely to happen. When it does happen, you're gonna sit back and you're gonna be like, how didn't I see this coming? There's so many things that are breadcrumbs that have been dropped. Let's start with the chain of events. Chain of event number one, Fred VanVleet leaves. Okay. That is free agency last year. Fred VanVleet leaves. Okay. That set into motion a rebuild for Toronto by default. You cannot lose a player that important to your franchise for absolutely nothing, okay? And expect that you're not going to suffer the consequences by just bringing back Dennis Schroeder. The Raptors had to pivot. There was, of course, the looming free agency of Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, the potential of having to overpay those guys, etc. And you had to make a choice between one or the other. You weren't going to sign both, and OG had the higher trade value. So you assume that you were going to trade OG and keep Pascal. And when the Raptors traded OG, that was my thought that they've chosen the wrong guy. But then they went and traded Pascal as well. And it was a little bit confusing. It was double confusing that the Raptors chose to deal with the New York Knicks, a team that they were embroiled in a lawsuit with, a team that had, classlessly once again has voted against Toronto getting a WNBA team. This is not water under the bridge because they made one good deal. Masai Ujiri still hates James Dolan. James Dolan still hates Toronto Raptors. The fact that these two teams were able to come together and make a blockbuster deal for Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett comes down to two things. Number one, the Knicks had absolutely zero interest in bringing back Emmanuel Quickley at the dollar amount that he wanted, and he was absolutely too good and too proud to take less money to stay in New York. Okay, this is a kid who loves New York. Obviously, he has a lot of love for New York, but what they were offering him was 18 million, and he said, "Boo, I'm not taking 18. I want 25." They see him as a backup. They're like, we're not gonna go there." Okay. So now we suddenly hear all these rumors about how OG Anunoby is connected with CAA because his agent is the guy's son and he's willing to move to New York for less because he just wants the big market. Red flag number one, just not true. It's just not true. There's so many things about that that are not true. Number one, the agent's son thing is a little not true. It's a little misleading. If you know, you know, like within CAA, who he's actually represented by, that's a little bit misleading. Number two, this whole limelight bullshit, it's just so not OG. So ultimately, the Toronto Raptors take back what they considered, what a lot of the people around the league considered a bad contract in RJ Barrett. They also take back Emmanuel Quickley, who the Knicks were not going to be able to re-sign because he is a restricted free agent and he had no interest coming back in the ballpark that they wanted him at, and they didn't value him at 25 million. They knew some other team would overpay. Orlando has cap space. They could use Emmanuel Quickley. San Antonio has cap space. They could use Emmanuel Quickley. Toronto would have cap space. Theoretically, if they moved off of OG, they could use Emmanuel Quickley to replace Fred VanVleet. So the Knicks decided, hey, this is what we'll do. And everyone in New York that I spoke to, everyone everyone in my family, my friends, people that I know within the circles who cover the Knicks, everyone walked in with the assumption that OG is coming back to the Knicks, no questions asked. And not only that, the hubris was so alarming. They said he was going to come back and he was going to take less, that he wasn't going to explore options like Philly, Detroit, Utah, Toronto, OKC. And I'm like, y'all really, really sold yourself on this idea that he wants to be there. But everything we'd heard for years about OG was larger role. Okay. So you have to go into a fact finding mission here to ask yourself, what do we know about this situation? What do we know about this player? Ask yourself if you're a Toronto Raptor fan. You watch this guy for 7 years. You know him, right? Like you may not know him personally. You may not know personal details, but you've watched him play. You've watched his interviews. You understand how he operates. You understand how he thinks. You understand that he's a very, very smart, intelligent guy, that he is going to do what is best for him ultimately at the end of the day. He's also now very business minded, making a lot of key investments overseas. So this is a guy who's thinking about that next contract. He took a major, major, major pay cut on his last contract. He's not doing that again. For him to compromise 2 contracts in a row when he is one of the hottest commodities in the league, and right now his market value could not be higher given what Drew Holiday just did for the in terms of being a championship raiser. No team in the league, there's no team in the league that would have 35 million that wouldn't give it to OG Anunoby right now. I am convinced that unless the team already has a Herb Jones or some player like this, or they're Boston and they're already set in terms of that, and even those teams, they would happily take him if they could absorb him into cap space. So the Toronto Raptors had this golden goose, in terms of OG. They had a boatload of teams trying to trade for him, and they opted to trade with a team that they absolutely despised and hated. And you can only imagine how many times you have to speak to someone. You have to speak to ownership. Ownership has to deal with ownership. The GMs have to deal with GMs. The pain and frustration for Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster to have to deal with that organization, that dumpster fire of an organization at times, whether you already have a strained relationship. The only reason you would have ever done this deal is if OG literally said, it's New York or bust for me. Do me a favor. I'm a franchise guy. I'm a loyal guy, but this is where I want to be. Don't send me elsewhere. And the Raptors say, okay. Now, if that were the case, if we believe that, then fine. It all makes sense. But it didn't make sense to me at all. He was going there to be with 2 guys who are extremely ball dominant. It doesn't put him in any position to explore the basketball greatness that he wanted to explore. It doesn't really help him to be on a team with Julius Randle that's aiming for Donovan Mitchell and all that stuff. He was a workhorse. He was a workhorse for the New York Knicks, right? So at this point, I'm inclined to say that the Toronto Raptors have a really good chance at signing OG, and they have set themselves up wonderfully to do this. Let me explain. Number one, okay, they made that move for OG and got back RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley. Emmanuel Quickley is a very special young player because despite the fact that he is a top 6 player in his draft class, he's actually not been paid like a top 6 player in his draft class because he was 25th overall pick. As a 25th overall pick, he has a cap hold of 12.5 million. That is a lot lower than cap holds for lottery talents, right? If Ochai Abaji, a 14th overall pick, hits free agency, or his cap hold is going to be like 15 or 18 million. Again, because Emmanuel Quickley is a restricted free agent and you can match any offer on him, you have that luxury. RJ Barrett, same thing. He is a guy who is tied up to a tradable, movable contract that is not exorbitant. You didn't take back $40, $50 million, Zach LaVine, some crazy thing. Then you had the move about Kelly Olynyk, Ochai Abaji, this whole finessing. And in that sense, you could make a case that the Raptors did take back some extra cap space, especially because they took off some cap space because they ended up trading and expiring an Otto Porter. They ended up re-signing Kelly. They signed him now to 12 million, which is less than his cap hold would have been. So they do end up opening up a little bit of flexibility. Then it was the confusing Bruce Brown thing, right? They take back Bruce Brown in that Pacers trade for Pascal. And if you're a casual observer, you're just like, why? Bruce Brown is a finishing piece. He is the type of guy that you want if you have a Nikola Jokic or a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like a superstar who's ready to compete. This is a guy who complements star. He is a luxury you cannot afford. At $23 million, it just didn't make sense. Why do you want him? Well, once again, you are at a point right now where you can outright decline a guy And if he was on the books next season, you'd be screwed. But right now, you have a team option for $23 million, which effectively is your Pascal Siakam salary match. And you can just let him walk. You can let him walk. You can absolutely let him walk. Then you have to consider the Dennis Schroeder trade, which I think was one of the most telling signs that the Raptors had this, OG thing on their mind. They traded Dennis Schroeder, who was performing extremely well, for a contract that they were just going to waive. They actually took back money to pay a guy in Spencer Dinwiddie. They paid more money to have Spencer Dinwiddie not play for them than they would have paid for Dennis Schroeder to play for them. How bad do you think that they felt Dennis Schroeder was, that they were willing to basically say, no, you're a perfectly fine backup guard, but instead, this is the Toronto Raptors. This is a team that has been hesitant to move off of players because they weren't getting enough pick equity back. This is a team that just dumped Dennis Schroeder for absolutely jack shit. They dumped him for nothing because he was a little unhappy. I mean, who cares if you're unhappy? Hold the asset, hold it till trade deadline. And now look at it. You would have Dennis Schroeder. Like, if your goal was to not be a cap space team this summer, you right now would have Dennis Schroeder expiring, Bruce Brown expiring, Chris Boucher expiring, Jalen McDaniels expiring. You would have a boatload of expiring picks. And I mean, like, you could parlay that into actual something. Like, you could parlay that in the cap flexibility. There was nothing that said you had to move off of Dennis Schroeder unless you wanted flexibility this summer. Now you have to consider the contract extensions. You have two major pieces, right? That are Scottie Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley. Those are going to be your two highest paid players within 2 years, okay? Barring an OG Anunoby signing. Scottie Barnes is extension eligible this summer. Emmanuel Quickley will sign his extension this summer. The minute one or both of those contracts are signed, your cap space days are over. You have the slimmest window to maximize this, okay? The absolute slimmest window. And that window is going to last literally 4 days, 3 to 4 days, okay? 3 to 4 days before you sign Emmanuel Quickley, before you ink Scottie Barnes' extension, which is going to be a rookie max extension. It's going to be like touching $40 million at some point, $45 million at some point. And if he makes an all NBA team, it's 30% of the cap. It's a lot of money. You're never going to see cap space again for the next 5 years under Scottie unless you strip down or trade him. So you have to use this period of time very wisely. And when you look at the free agency class, unless you're going to sell yourself on the idea that the Raptors are just really desperate to sign Nick Claxton or Isaiah Hartenstein, it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. Now you consider the extra cap space that the Raptors earned because they lost their top six protected for a first round pick to San Antonio. That clears up an extra $6+ million. Okay, as it currently stands, because you re-signed Kelly Olynyk to $12 million, the cap hold is no longer an issue. Because you haven't signed, you can renounce the following players. You can renounce Gary Trent Jr., renounce or don't pick up the option on Bruce Brown. Okay. You renounce Jordan Nwora. Okay. If you just get rid of those players, just clear them off. And I know some people are out there going to be like, oh, that's a lot of, something to lose. It's not a lot to lose if you're using that cap space for OG. All right. You can clear up $32 million right now for OG Anunoby. How does that feel? Now, you might say, well, 32 is not enough. We're hearing rumors that he wants 35. Okay, well, guess what? You have Chris Boucher, you have Jalen McDaniels on your team. That is a combined $15 million. You can easily trade those two expirings for a longer term contract that is negotiable, like in the 12 million range, $2-3 million, 3 years, 12 million, a player that sort of fits, a team that's looking for a little bit of cap relief, and you can free up an additional $3 million. You can also waive and stretch Chris Boucher if you really wanted to. I'm sure he'd be open to that. You can stretch it out. There are a myriad of ways that you can use one of your contacts around the league to help you facilitate an extra $2-3 million to get under. Now, obviously, if the Toronto Raptors had kept their top 6 pick or had moved up in the draft, and now you're talking about, multiples up, like the first pick, second pick, that's 10 million, 12 million. Now your cap space is sunk. If you had Dennis Schroeder on your books, and if he'd had a bad second half of the season, once again, cap space sunk. The minute you pick up Bruce Brown's contract and you're not just throwing him outright to somebody for cap space, which I can never understand why someone would ever do that. Okay, that is a bellwether sign, that you consider that a bellwether that the Toronto Raptors have struck out on the OG Anunoby pre-negotiations, which of course, no one is ever going to talk about it as tampering, blah, 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 blah. But really, let's be real. OG Anunoby and Scotty Barnes are talking. You don't think the conversation has come up between two brothers, two guys who, came up together, two guys who are so close that they call each other best friends. You don't think the conversations come up being like, hey, we have a power forward sized hole and a lot of fucking shot opportunities under this egalitarian offense that we're running here, where everybody passes and everybody moves and everybody grows and everybody gets better. You don't think the existing relationships that are there. Now, the historical context of this is why I want this so badly for Toronto. Okay. I want this so bad for Toronto. I can feel it in my gut. The Toronto Raptors have been a fucking farm team for other teams for 25 years. I'm not crying poverty here. I just want you to understand this. Chris Bosh basically lied to Brian Colangelo's face at the midseason mark. And I swear to God, if you were following me back then, way back then, I was like, this dude is gone. This dude is gone. Like, it was so obvious to me Chris Bosh was going to go somewhere. I thought he was going to go to Texas. I really thought he was going to go to Dallas or Houston, whichever team had cap space that summer. And I think they thought that too. And then suddenly he does an about turn. He goes to Miami. I didn't know he was going to go to Miami, but I knew he wasn't coming back to Toronto. And he didn't come back to Toronto. And you weren't telling me that Dwayne Wade and LeBron James didn't have something to do with him sitting out those final 8-9 games, in Toronto, when the Raptors still had playoffs in their mind. You'd think that? I mean, I know a true story about a real tampering issue with the Raptors, where the Raptors did tamper to get somebody else's free agent. I'm going to leave that one off the public record. This shit happens all the time, all the time. Okay, the fact that teams don't get called for it. Now, what about the Kawhi Leonard situation? You think Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers, or Kawhi Leonard's representation in the Clippers, talk for the first time on July 1st? Of course not. That's not what happened at all. They wooed him all year. So frankly, I'm not a big Chris Bosh fan, but we lost for nothing. I mean, God, I think we got a first round pick back for Chris Bosh, but pretty much lost for nothing. And why do you think he got that first round pick back? That was a please don't tell that we tampered first round pick. Okay. The Toronto Raptors have been fleeced in this exact same situation multiple times. It's time for a little bit of payback. It's time for a little bit of retribution. Quite frankly, I think that getting a free agent who spurns the New York Knicks, the mighty New York, to come to cold ass Toronto, don't let anybody know, as the temperature is basically the same fucking thing in both cities. I think it would do wonders for this fan base's lack of self-esteem. Okay. As a New Yorker who came to Toronto, it was one of my biggest beefs that this franchise and fan base generally did not believe in themselves. They always felt that Americans did not want to come here and blah, 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 blah. And they could never compete with the big markets and they were never in the play for free agency. Okay, well, here, OG Anunoby might be the top free agent. I mean, depending on how you feel about Paul George, he might be the top free agent. He's definitely more in demand than Pascal Siakam. He can go anywhere he wants. If he wants to facilitate a sign and trade to go to a team that doesn't have cap space, he can go there. I think it would be incredible if he chose Toronto. There's a million reasons he should choose Toronto. From a basketball fit perspective, I think it would launch the Raptors into a completely different timeline, to the point where I do believe they could be a home court advantage, like a home court team next year in the playoffs with him. He does make that big a difference. He really does. Now, I hear constant criticism. Oh, Rob, we can't sign OG Anunoby because he's too injury prone. He spends half the year in street clothes. The most abysmal, stupid ass comment I've ever heard. First of all, OG Anunoby has never missed half a season in a single season ever. Here's some fast math for you, okay? This might make you feel better. It might make you feel worse. Frankly, I don't really give a fuck. It is math, okay? Over the last 2 years, OG Anunoby has played in 71% of available games. Okay, so in 71% of potential games, OG Anunoby has played. Now, if you watch the guy play, I don't have to tell you how hard he plays. I don't have to tell you the difficulty of what he does on both ends. I don't need to tell you about him as a screener, as a rebounder, as a defender, a guy who bangs with centers and chases point guards off of screens. His load his distance traveled, his difficulty of matchup on a night to night basis is literally chart shattering. So if he plays 71% of available games, I guarantee you he works harder in an NBA season, runs harder, works harder, bangs harder than 99% of the league. So if he's gonna miss 20 games a year or 25 games a year, I'm for it as long as those games aren't in the playoffs. You might say small sample size, Rob. He's been relatively healthy the last 2 years. What about the years before that? First of all, a lot of freak injuries. There's games missed in there for his father passing away. I'm not sure you're going to count that as being injury prone. There was an there was an appendix issue at some point. That's not an injury. That's not happening twice. If you take those injuries off, he's played over 75% of available games. So this whole talk about him being super injury prone, this is not a situation. He's not Kristaps Porzingis, okay? Like I just think that it's a little bit silly, okay, personally. And second, if you have a little bit of depth, you can probably scale his minutes back and you can load manage him. Oh yeah, the Toronto Raptors know a little bit of something about load management. They load managed Kawhi to a very healthy season. So, long story short, why do the Raptors do this and what can they do? And do I really think this is going to happen? Look, initially when I started doing this, it was partially, it was half in jest. It was to troll the Knicks fans because I just didn't like how confident they were that they were going to get this guy back. They thought he wasn't going to look at Philly. He wasn't going to look at OKC. They're just like, oh my God, New York. Who wouldn't want to be in New York? That's the problem with Knicks fans. They always think, who wouldn't want to be in New York? Well, some people wouldn't want to be in New York, and OG Anunoby might be one of them. I think OG was dominant in New York. I think the Knicks should probably offer him whatever the hell he wants. In the best case scenario for the Raptors, absolute best case scenario, OG Anunoby gives you a little bit of a hometown discount. He signs 32 million with maximum raises for 4 years. Okay. And you get a guy who you get a guy who fits with Scotty. You get a guy who fits on Scotty's timeline. You get a guy who absolutely shores up the biggest weakness on your roster. In fact, he shores up almost all of the weaknesses on your roster. He's a 3-point shooter, right? He is an incredible defender. He offers paint protection. He offers a tremendous benefit to you in the point of attack. He is a great system defender, team defender. We just saw the Boston Celtics win an NBA championship because they had several players like OG. Well, you also have several players like OG. If you get OG back, okay, you have OG, you have Scotty, like you can get a little bit longer. I would trust that the defensive upside of OG, Scotty, Emmanuel Quickly, and Jakob Pertl could withstand even having RJ Barrett out there. Now, try to imagine stopping a team that has that punch defensively. OG is like he fits this roster better than any player that I can think of in the NBA. Like, okay, yeah, if I'm going real, big game hunting, I could look at guys like Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. Yes, those guys would fit just as well. But his archetype, his player type, especially if he figures to play the four going forward, I think he could fit incredibly well. And I think he can get a lot of what he wants here. I think he can get a lot of development reps with Jama and Darko. He trusts the system, he trusts the players, he knows some of these players. I think this would be great. Now, the Toronto Raptors have a big OG size hole, and I don't know where else they're going to fill it. There's nothing in free agency. Alex Caruso is not a free agent. Herb Jones didn't even touch free agency. Trey Murphy is going to be restricted free agent. You're going to have to offer him a max contract if you want that. And frankly, I don't even think Trey Murphy is that good a defender. I think he's an okay defender. I think he would work really well. If the Toronto Raptors manage to get OG Anunoby, I'm telling you right now, they are firmly on track for an NBA championship within the next 5 years. Like this is the type of roster that wins championships. Scotty, OG, RJ. First of all, that just rolls right off your tongue, right? Scotty, okay. Scotty, RJ, OG. Okay. And you got IQ, right? You got Grady Dick, right? Penny Hardaway, 24. Rob, there's a narrative he didn't want to play in Toronto anymore. Any truth to it? Hell, the hell no. Okay. Now I'm going to say this just again to connect the breadcrumbs for y'all. Y'all been watching Scotty Barnes for 3 years. Okay. If you follow Scotty on socials, you know damn well, like you know damn well that Scotty Barnes is always celebrating his people. Okay. He don't hold any shade. He's gonna be happy for Fred VanVleet getting his new contract. He doesn't hold any shade. He's still rooting on guys that he went to AAU with, high school with, college with. He's supporting his people forever. And OG is one of his people. He's one of his people. He's one of his dudes, right? Why would Scotty be upset if OG got traded, if OG wanted to leave? He'd be happy for him, right? I mean, first of all, why would OG want to leave? I mean, that's my perspective, right? He has roots here. He has serious roots here, and I mean, some of y'all know about it. Some of you may not know about it, but he has some roots here, some good, deep connections here. He has a great relationship with the coaching staff. The new coaching staff really took him in, and he was fantastic with them. It's a great relationship with Masai Ujiri. Great relationship with the training staff. They've kept him relatively healthy. Why? Why leave? Right? Why leave? And then on top of that, you got the Scotty Barnes connection, right? Like, why leave? And why would Scotty be upset? Again, if OG genuinely just wanted to go to New York, everything out of Scotty would have been, I'm happy for my boy. I'm happy for my guy. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for, but we didn't get that. We got a depressed, pissed off Scotty for an entire month. Don't you see that? Don't you get it? Trading Dennis made no fucking sense to me. Extending, Kelly Olynyk when they didn't make sense. I mean, it makes some sense, but it didn't make a hell of a lot of sense, right? And even if you had kept that San Antonio pick or like our pick that was, conveyed to San Antonio, that's quite a big trade piece to move off some extra salary. If you wanted to trade that pick for a future pick, I'm sure there's someone there that's willing to give you a future pick for that pick, right? So it wasn't like you weren't hamstrung. It's not like the Raptors hinged their whole offseason on the lottery balls, right? Okay. Eddie, you need to go back 4 minutes and just listen to what I said about OG being injury prone. He's not injury prone. This is stupid. Honestly, like it's a recency bias thing. And honestly, you don't need him to play. You don't need him to play 95 games a year. You just don't. You need him to play the right 65 to 70 games. You need him to be healthy for the playoffs and do everything in your power to make sure that he will be healthy for the playoffs. You know what I mean? You're rolling a dice with any player. I mean, it's not like every single player on your roster doesn't have injury history. Like Scotty Barnes missed 20 games last year. He's had various ankle rolls. Are you concerned about signing Scotty to a super max extension or a max extension? Pascal Siakam had a pulled groin, shoulder, he had surgery. I don't hear this stuff about him, right? It's just sometimes a guy gets a reputation that exceeds what the reality of the player is. OG Anunoby he's not the healthiest, most durable player. I'm never gonna say that he's a super durable guy or he's an Iron Man. He's never gonna have an 82 game season. Probably he's never gonna have an 82 game season. But man, like he is extremely valuable. Bradley O'Neal. I honestly don't think I have ever seen OG do any kind of fist pump till I watched him in NY. Yes, because fist pumping is the way that we determine exactly what people are going to do. But we've never seen him healthy in the playoffs, and I don't think we will see him healthy. That's not even true. That's not even remotely true. He was healthy in the Sixers series. He was also healthy in the Cleveland series. What are you talking about? No, not at all. He's a dud on offense. He has no handles and no bags, says Araf Haroon. I bet you he beat you 101 to nothing, though. Bet money. All right. Pain causing samurai. Unlikely, but hypothetically speaking, if this season turns out bad, would you want Scotty traded somewhere that would be better for his development? I will always want good things for Scotty, but I think it's really great for Scotty to be here. I mean, I wouldn't be supporting it if it wasn't great for him. You know, I got to tell you, somewhere between year two, I was like, oh my God, are they really going to screw this up? Right now, Scotty, obviously, like, with all players, I'm a Raptor fan, of course, just like, but I do root for people as well. I can root for OG in New York, even though I find Knicks fans insufferable. I can root for Jason Tatum and, in Boston. I can root for DeJounte Murray in Atlanta. I root for Victor Wembanyama and on the San Antonio Spurs. There are certain players that I just have an affinity for, or, an affection for, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna root for those guys wherever they go. Okay, So with Scotty, I'll root for him wherever he goes. And right now, I'm very, very happy for him that he is, he's found the right coach that understands his game. And I feel like prior to this year, he didn't have a coach that understood his game or how to unlock it. And if you're a fan of a player, why would you want to see that player's career derailed because they're in the wrong system for them, or they're in the wrong locker room, or they're not vibing with their teammates or whatever. So I think it's been really great to see the Toronto Raptors building around Scotty, and also it's been great to see him building back. Right now, I've always maintained this, and this is going back a couple of years, that Scotty Barnes is a great recruiter. He's an excellent recruiter. That ultimately players around the league would want to play with this guy. And I believe that to be the case because he's very well connected. He's very social. He's just a person that people always speak well about. He's not a pariah. He's extremely connected within the AAU circuit, within even the Legends circuit in the NBA. Like, he's a guy that LeBron knows, you know what I mean? Like he knows of him, like, because he was such a big deal as a youth prospect, and because he is just generally speaking a really great dude, like people really like him. And that helps, that your main guy has that personality to bring people together. The one thing we heard about Scotty as a prospect that turned out to be true, right? There's a lot of things that turned out to not be true. Zero level scorer, limited this, not going to be much more than a role player, et cetera, never going to average more than 15 points per game. Okay. So great point of attack defender, screen navigator. Okay. That didn't turn out to be so. So there's very few things about his scouting report that ended up being very true. But one of them that everybody said, and I remember even like the smartest people to the dumbest people had the exact same idea of Scotty, which is he's a connector. He's a connector. He's versatile and he's a connector. And those two things have held true, right? And the connector part, of course, applies to basketball on the court. He is a connective piece in terms of, and people often use that to mean role player. I understand that. But there are elite connectors as well. I think Anthony Davis is an example of an elite connector. Draymond Green's an example of an elite connector, right? You could look at guys like that, Lamar Odom, like the better versions of this player archetype. But this also comes down to a personality type, right? A connective personality type is someone who can rally people together, who tends to keep things together, bring people together, confront ideas. So I've always felt like Scotty was a connective guy, that he had an investment in a place that he was in, that he wanted to make that place better. Honestly, I got to tell you, this actually comes back to a personal anecdote of mine. When I moved into this place, um, I didn't renovate everything, but one thing that I really didn't know how to renovate or even want to think to renovate was the bathroom. The bathroom was very dingy. The sink was sort of torn up a little bit. The bath, the tub was very, very old, and it looked very bad. It felt like a little bit yellow in places, a little bit rusty, and I'm just like, shit. Like, how am I going to replace this? And then one day I got a roommate, and shout outs to Dimitar. He's a Bulgarian guy. He was coming from Bulgaria, and I didn't know too much about him, but it was like a couple of days into when he moved in, and I went to take a shower, and I looked down, and I was like, "Bro, did this guy replace the bathtub?" I'm just looking at it, it's like clean, like pearl white, like it's brand new. And I asked him, I was like, "Yo, what happened here?" He's like, "I cleaned it." I mean, I don't know how he did it, what industrial grade materials he used to get rid of everything, but he made it perfect. I'd had roommates before that never even thought to do that. But this guy had an ownership and an investment in the place. He was going to live there. It's a part of him. So if the wall was chipping a little bit, he was going to paint it. You know what I mean? There's certain people like that where they come into a place and they immediately feel like they're obligated to make it better. Scotty has that personality. He is like what people call a culture builder. So prove it to be true, Scotty Barnes, recruit OG Anunoby. It would be your first, order of business. Maybe later on when Moses Moody and guys like that come up to, restricted free agency, if the Warriors don't extend Moses this offseason, Dayron Sharp, there's tons of guys. There's tons of guys that Scotty's very connected to. And I almost guarantee you at some point this is going to pay dividends, right? His personality as a person that people look, man, these guys spend more time with their teammates than they do with their families. Okay. And that's not just speaking on the court, it's off the court too. Having a selfless teammate who keeps things light, who cares about you, who puts you in good positions to succeed is not something that grows on trees. There are a lot of stars out there who are not goofy like Scotty, who are not humble like Scotty. They're actually quite prima donnas and quite, selfish. And so I've always felt maybe that Scotty was the type of player that I would have loved to play with. Right. So I think a lot of people will feel that way. I think if some point down the line, you see guys like Trey Murphy, Jose Alvarado. Man, I could make you like 100 players that vibe with Scotty. Onyeka Okongwu. I'm telling you, at some point, if this guy's your franchise guy, it's going to pay off in free agency. And it doesn't hurt that the reputation around Toronto. I understand it's still not the free agent destination. I understand if LA or New York usually are going to have major cap space, or Miami, you're going to have major cap space, you're probably going to lose out to those teams. But I feel like the days of Toronto losing out to like San Antonio and Phoenix might be over. You know what I mean? Like at some point, we are going to get to a point where Toronto is going to be like one of the top 8, 7 free agent destinations. There's so much to do in the city. It's super appealing to the new demographic of NBA player, right? Which is a business minded NBA player that wants business opportunities, that wants a market, that wants, fanfare and a following, right? Like you get a bigger market here. I don't think people realize when they say this is a big market, this is a small market, how big a market Toronto really is in terms of basketball coverage, right? Like you got 300 people right now in the hottest day of the year, so, watching some guy speculate for the eighth video. I think it's the sixth video. You got 300 people in here June 18th, days away from free agency, right? Days away from the draft. We're like almost a week away from the draft. This is a market, man. This is a market. It's not quite New York. I get it. I get it. I'm from New York. I understand it's not quite New York. It's not quite LA, but it's damn close. It's damn close. It's getting there. It's really getting there. And I'm telling you that at some point, this is the vision that Tim Lewicki saw. This is the vision that Masai Ujiri saw. And I understand that a lot of fans still think differently about it because they were brainwashed by hockey media or whatever that, oh, Vince didn't want to be here. Lies. Facts. That's completely a lie. Vince wanted to be here. Tracy never wanted to leave. Tracy thinks about it now and he's like, I wish I didn't leave. Right? Charles Barkley. Look at the players who count this as one of the 5 best cities in the league. There's so many. So many. Brandon Ingram, like he thinks is a top 5 market. Kristaps Porzingis put Toronto on the short list of teams that he wanted to be traded to. So, look, the league goes more international. Giannis was a real possibility. If the Bucks didn't step up their game, maybe it was a real possibility, right? DeMar, he loved it here. He was a Compton kid. Okay, so this is not the same poverty franchise. I think here's the thing. You call it false consciousness, right? You have a problem with your boss, he blames it on his boss, right? You have a problem with the economy, they blame it on immigrants, right? That's false consciousness, right? It's just diverting your focus away from something that you could be focusing on to something they want you to be focusing on. Here's the truth. MLSC was a joke. The teachers' pension plan was a joke. The Toronto Raptors were a joke. They were a joke franchise. It was hilarious and ridiculous the more you dug into how this team operated prior to Brian Colangelo coming on, prior to Tim Lewicki, prior to Masai Ujiri. The things they did, the way they operated, the way they dealt with agents, the way they dealt with players was honestly, it was embarrassing. And instead of owning up to that and just saying we could be better, we're going to learn. We're new to this. We're fucking up. We're cheap. You know, we're not doing things the right way. Instead of that, they just made it seem like American athletes don't want to be here. And honestly, it just became a thing. And no matter how many times you're going to hear it from a player, trust me, there are American athletes that don't want to be in Milwaukee. There are American athletes that don't want to be, especially black athletes that don't want to be in Boston. There are a ton of players that don't want to be in conservative states. So, yeah, maybe Toronto is not the top 2 team or top 3 team for any NBA player out there. Maybe if you put a gun to his head, Toronto would not have been a top 3 place that Scotty wanted to play. But that doesn't mean that it's not one of the top 10. It doesn't mean it's not one of the top 5, right? And that's not the worst thing in the world. So, you know, I think the stability of the organization plus the vibe of the city and the bustling growth of the city, it trumps a lot of the taxes and the border shit and whatever. And I think if you give people a place where they're happy to be, you give people a place where they're happy to work, and you give people a place where they're winning and they're being taken care of fairly, monetarily, just emotionally, they're being poured into and they're getting better. Man, people will want to stay there. So I think, credit to Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, Tim Lewicki, uh, Brian Colangelo as well, and basically everyone who came before them for making Toronto a place that I'm really proud, to say that I think NBA players want to be here. And there's no NBA player on free agency that would know more about the beauty of this city and how awesome this place is than OG Anunoby. So with that, I say I think OG should be a realistic target for the Toronto Raptors. I think the Raptors will have a meeting. I think Scotty Barnes will be in that meeting. And I think if nothing else, if nothing else, the boogeyman that Toronto is becoming in the free agency market for OG Anunoby should be at least 5% payback for the shit that the Knicks have done to the Toronto Raptors over the last year. James Dolan, Clutch, everything they've been doing from tampering to negotiating some of these contracts that are just like, how did they get that guy at that price? How did they get Dante DiVincenzo at that price? How are they keep signing these guys at below market? They think they can do this with everybody. And this is an unfair advantage. They're already in one of the best cities in the world. They're already in this huge market. Now they got this unfair advantage. They're trying to stack up, and OG is no dummy. Okay. So right now, I'll tell you right now, if you sign OG Anunoby to 40 million because you're afraid that Philly or Toronto is going to clear up enough space to sign him to 40 million, good luck with your roster next year as Dante DiVincenzo and Isaiah Hartenstein or whoever, Josh Hart, are looking around at OG thinking, I'm not that much worse than this guy, and he's making 3.5 times more than me. That envy is a real thing, and it can get in the way of things. So, look, the Toronto Raptors have an opportunity here. It is not a long-term opportunity. It's not an opportunity you can fork over. It's not an opportunity you can say, okay, well, we don't want to do it right now. We'll do it later. There is no later. You do this now or you do this never. There's literally no later. Because the minute that Scotty extension goes in, the minute that Emmanuel Quickly extension is signed, you have to trade one of those guys to ever get cap space again. The Toronto Raptors, the last time they had cap space, DeMar Carroll. Okay. The time before that, it was Hito Turkoglu. So we will consider this third time's the charm. And ironically, all three times you ended up going for a very in demand big wing. And this will be the best one yet. Let's go Raptors. Let's go OG Anunoby. And thank you very much to this community for this. Felicia, first of all, thank you so much for correcting me on the Chet Holmgren thing. Yesterday, I mentioned that Chet was not OKC's pick, that it was, some other team's pick. And Felicia correctly said, no, it was OKC's pick. So my bad on that. Second, any clause in the NBA that would prevent his return? Absolutely not. Okay, so there is a clause, I believe, in the current CBA that would prevent his return if he was waived. He could not sign back with the same team. I believe that is there, but there is absolutely no clause that says a player cannot be traded. There's a lot of misinformation right now, around Raptor space. The number one misinformation, I already talked about it, is he's injury prone. I've already talked about it. He's not that injury prone. The number two thing is he's not really worth 35 million. He totally is. In my opinion, he's absolutely worth every penny of that. The third bit of misinformation is that it would be considered tampering or that it's against the CBA. It is not against the CBA. You can absolutely sign OG Anunoby just for the same way that the Spurs nearly signed Jakob Poeltl. Now, last year, the Spurs were the boogeyman for the Raptors. Raptors had to pay Jakob Poeltl 19.5 or $20 million when his fair market value was actually 15. And why did they have to do that? Because Jakob Poeltl had a landing spot to go back to San Antonio, and San Antonio had the cap space to absorb him. So question is right now here's actually a real valid question. If the Spurs interest in Jakob Poeltl was real last year and you really need to clear up some cap space right now, could you trade Jakob Poeltl for the 8th overall pick? That's something worth thinking about if you really want to sign OG to more money. But nevertheless, I would like to pair OG with Jakob, with Scotty, with RJ, and with Emmanuel quickly because I think you have probably one of the most exciting Raptors teams in a really long time with those five guys together. But there's nothing in the CBA that says you can't do that at all. We're gonna bring on Coach Mo. Coach Mo, what up, man?
If this happens, do you think there'll be discussions about a rule to prevent this? Like you can't sign a player you traded for like a year or something. Remember the Zydrunas Ilgauskas buyout? That was obviously more um that was more unfair. Like the Cavaliers bought him, the Cavaliers traded him, the team that acquired him bought him out, and then he
Okay.
just went back to Cleveland, so they had to put a rule in place.
Yes,
But
that is different.
it is different. But if we get him, it kind of feels dirty. I'm not gonna lie. And since it's to the Knicks, it's sweet, but it still kind of feels it kind of feels dirty. Like it was premeditated. You know what I mean?
Not only do you actually get RJ Barrett, and he ends up being better than advertised, right? So he's not a toxic contract, and he's fully, you know, we're okay. Was I the only person who was watching the Knicks struggle to score against the Pacers, thinking to myself, "Damn, they could really use RJ Barrett right now."
I mean, what's it called? McBride is a bucket himself, but he's mainly only perimeter. He was
He's
basically
hella inconsistent. I mean, look, I think that the New York Knicks, um, it's just it never sat right with me that the Toronto Raptors dealt with that team, no matter how much I like Emmanuel quickly, and I liked the return when it came back, and I graded the trade very well. And I think they got a very competitive offer for OG. Um,
if this happens, okay, the lineups that he just opens up so many options where it's like, okay, you got the starting five with Jakob, OG, Scotty,
well,
RJ, and IQ. Then you can just swap um, the Jakob for Olenek, and now it's five out offense. Or you can have Grady in place of the five man, and then you have OG and Scotty as the bigs, right? Where those seven are interchangeable because
exactly.
OG and Scotty are truly positionless, right?
Well, that's exactly it. Like, what did we just see? We saw like why are the Boston Celtics as good as they are, right? Derek White and Drew Holiday can effectively guard the paint and the
Mhm.
perimeter. They can navigate screens, right? They have multi-positional versatility. They can both shoot, right? Now, neither one is a great breakdown, break you off the dribble type of guy, right? But they're smart. They cut without the basketball, they space correctly, they relocate correctly, and they defend their tails off. OG is cut from the same cloth as those guys. He's valuable for the same reason that those guys are valuable. He's a different type of player, and he's even bigger. He has even more positional versatility. He can guard even more positions. Like OG is the one guy in the league who legit can guard 1 through 5. You could say Herb Jones can guard 1 through 4. You could say Scotty can guard 2 through 5. But Scotty can't guard ones that
Yeah.
well. I mean, he's had some success on Trey Young. He's had some success on Steph Curry. He has success on those shooting types. But anytime you have a quick, twitch, a Darius Garland, a shifty handle, Kyrie Irving type of guy, he's going to get blown by. That's not the case for OG. And he has, like, I've seen OG, I don't want to say stop Nikola Jokic, but have a lot of success against Jokic and Embiid, right? The same guy who can guard Kyrie Irving can guard, Joel Embiid and do a reasonable job at it. The guy, like we remember the first game of the season against the Minnesota Timberwolves, like the
Oh
nightmares,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
game that Anthony Edwards had. That's
Mhm.
OG. So
Yep.
look, I think a bought in OG, into this lineup. And look, when I first brought this up, everyone laughed. Everyone laughed. They thought it was cute. They thought it was funny. Ha ha ha. Rob. Now I'm seeing major news outlets bringing this up. Jake Fisher.
You won't get
Yeah,
credit though. You ain't gonna get no credit.
I'm not going to get credit. I got a video on public record is the only video at that time period citing this is gonna happen, and it's going play by play so far. And that video had like nearly 30,000 views. I better
Oh,
get
yeah.
credit.
So
I don't even care if I get credit. Fuck the
yeah,
credit. I
yeah,
don't
I know,
care.
I
I
know.
just want this to
I'm just saying.
happen. I
I'm
just want
saying
this to
it's a
happen.
pattern on you were ahead on the Fred thing. You were ahead on the Nick Nurse thing. You were ahead on you were quick on the Jakob trades horrible, right?
It was instantaneous.
You were ahead on don't shit on Grady. I'm saying, like, in hindsight, there was a lot of things you were not wrong about. But I'm more interested in talking
I
about,
still,
okay.
I still, I still pick the Dallas Mavericks to win the fucking series. So fuck.
Yeah, I know.
We're not.
I
We're
mean,
not.
and in fairness, I did too. But we were right in that we didn't believe in Boston, and a part of that was because Jason Tatum, and we saw
Right.
what we saw, and we were justified in our beliefs in some of the things we believed. Right?
Yeah.
It was literally the role players, just for the
It's
most
just too
part.
many coincidences, man. Like I think where there's there's an old saying that when there's smoke, there's fire, right? There's a lot of smoke here, man. There's a lot of hints that have been dropped. There's a lot of things that were way too good to be true, way too hard to believe. It's way too good to be true that the Raptors would deal with the Knicks after, being embroiled. Like find one whenever you get into, 0.1% type of outcomes, you have to start looking with some scrutiny. If I had told you after the Knicks lawsuit, give me rank every team that you could see OG going to, I think the Knicks probably would have been bottom 5.
Yeah. So there's a unwritten rule: you don't trade within your own division.
That's also
Already.
true. That
You,
too.
you forget your conference. You don't even trade to your conference. Division is unheard of. And then it's the team you're beefing with on top of that. And
Mhm.
the Raptors are notorious for dragging their feet. This trade was in December. So it was
Yeah.
even early, right? It wasn't even that
December
long.
end. It was like December 30th.
I
Yeah.
mean, Siakam's took a while. OG, it was like, whoa, the most random. You woke up to it, right? Siakam's, you could kind of see it coming, and you kind of knew which team, one or two. OG's came out of nowhere. It
Mhm.
blindsided almost everybody.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I mean, again, it's still less than 5% that this can happen, right? It gets more probable by the day. And obviously, if the Raptors pick up Bruce Brown, we're dead
What
in the
makes
water.
it
We're
listen?
sunk.
What makes it 5%? Like what gives the Knicks that
Okay, so one
edge?
thing that one thing that I haven't talked about is, well, number one, they have his bird rights. They can go above the cap, right? They can offer
Yeah.
him literally anything that he
Mhm.
wants. The Raptors are somewhat limited in what they can offer unless they clear up a little bit more space. So there's going to be a money advantage for New York. There's also a marketing advantage for New York. There's also the CAA connection with New York. There are certain things that push him towards New York. The only thing that pushes him towards Toronto is if he genuinely just wanted to be here in the first place, and this was just a nice little foray and a bit of a fuck you to the Knicks. Also, there's familiarity here. He could have maybe wanted to go there, and now he's not so sure that he wants to be there. I mean, people are free to change their minds. I think there's also you have to look at the other teams. If he's testing himself in free agency, here are the other teams that have money in free agency. Orlando potentially can clear up some space. Detroit, Utah. Um,
He ain't going to
I
those.
don't know why they would go this way, but OKC could potentially do something with him for about I think they have about $39 million. And then there's Toronto. I mean, I'm not. I know I'm missing another team that has that, and Philly, of course, Philly, right? And
Isn't San
Philly,
Antonio?
you can make a case, and San Antonio. So those are your options, right? San Antonio. So San Antonio, Philly, I could see. Okay, OKC, I could see.
It'd break my heart if he went to Philly. It'd break my heart. I'd be so conflicted. I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Well, in a way, Philly's going to be better than you, whether they sign Paul
No,
George
I'm not
or
saying
him.
that.
At
I'm
least
just
this way, you
I'm
completely
being rooting
deplete the
against
Knicks.
them, so it makes it weird.
Right. Yeah, it would suck to see OG on the same team as Nick Nurse and Embiid. I wouldn't even know what to do with myself. I'd be rooting for Tyrese Maxey and OG, and I'd be booing like Nick Nurse and Joel Embiid. So it's weird.
Listen, if Scotty Barnes is his best friend, he's not going to Philly. He wouldn't do that to his boy.
I think
I'm just
I
I'm
think there's like if I had to rank it, probably the most likely outcome is he goes to the Knicks, right?
Yes.
I'll say that. Like
Who has a better chance, us or Philly? Because he had
Phil-
complaints about Nick
Phil-
Nurse. He had complaints about Nick Nurse.
he had more complaints about Fred VanVleet. He had so
And Nick Nurse let that happen.
Philly has more money, right? But it remains to be seen if Philly is willing to offer him 39 million or 38 million or whatever the hell they can offer him, right? So I think in the end the money advantage goes towards the Knicks. They can go as far, they can go really high. San Antonio could clearly, come in and sweep him off his feet and give him a ton of money. I just don't. Again, he's going to have his options. The Knicks are going to have to pony up. Worst case scenario, you're putting the Knicks into a very uncomfortable cap situation. Now,
Right.
any thoughts of like, okay, so initially when I talked to someone in the New York space, what they said to me was the goal with OG is because they have Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo and Jalen Brunson on such a cheap deal. That's why they wanted to keep like their floor low with Emmanuel quickly, right? They felt that they could consolidate what they were paying RJ into basically an OG salary. So they expected him to come back at 25. Now, that's crazy. And that's just not happening because there's like 25 teams in the league that would beat that eyes closed, don't look. So they're going to have to pay him a little bit more, and which is crazy to say because he missed so much time with them last year, right? I think he missed like, I don't know, I don't remember how many games he missed with them, but he missed quite a bit of time, and then he was
Half the team
disastrous.
missed the game. Half the team was gone by the end.
Right. And then also like the playoffs, right? Like, I mean, he was not available in the playoffs. So in a lot of ways, you would think to yourself, can you imagine if he was healthy in the playoffs, what his stock would be like right now? This is his stock at half full. Okay. And his stock at half full is basically a max player. So the Knicks thinking that they were going to be able to sign him for 27 or 28 million dollars and basically fit him into that RJ Barrett spot and then be able to maybe finagle move not move Josh Hart, but like move a couple of, small pieces, maybe move Julius Randle and then chase a max player. If OG takes 40 million, I mean, the Knicks are a big market team, but they still have to operate under the CBA.
Mm-hmm.
The apron is the apron. That's the whole point of the new CBA is to take this advantage that super wealthy big market teams have over smaller market over their smaller market counterparts. And so the Knicks will be facing like massive luxury tax.
They're in our situation prior because it's like you actually don't have a championship roster, but you're going to have to pay Hartenstein. You're going to have to pay Josh Hart. You're going to have to pay DiVincenzo. You're going to have to pay Brunson, right? Julius Randle's contract is ending soon. It's like all these guys, right? And if you do, it's still not a championship roster theoretically. So it's like,
so Julius Randle is signed next year. He is, relatively speaking, still on a bit of a contract bargain. I mean, I think a lot of people have some negative things to say about him, but he's an all NBA guy who makes $30 million. Jalen Brunson's at 24. His contract actually goes down next year, and it was probably so that they could do something with free agency. They have Bojan Bogdanovic that they can clear out. They have OG Anunoby. If he starts slotting in at 40 million, if the numbers start to get crazy for OG, right? Now, again, they'd factored in 27, which would have been halfway between Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. But if he starts getting into like the 40 range, like the 36, 38, like there goes your cap space. You're screwed. You have Mitchell Robinson on a descending contract, which is really interesting. They structured that contract that way. He goes from 15.6 million to 14.3 to 12.9. So clearly this team has built with this in mind. Josh Hart is on a frigging massive steal, but he has an extension kicking in. So you said they have to extend him. That's not true. They already extended him. So he next year 18, the year after 19.5, the year after 21, the year after 22.6. So, you have him, but he's hitting 30. Josh Hart, the way he plays, he's hitting 30 next year. So they signed him from 31 to 34. They got Jalen Brunson at 27. I mean, their time is now.
yep,
Their time is now. And OG has them by the balls. He can ask what, like whatever they thought. Like, I'm just saying, play it out this way. Best case scenario, Raptors get OG back. Friggin' phenomenal. Become instant legends. The stuff people are talking about for 40 years. Y'all remember the time that the Knicks tried to sue the Raptors and the Raptors traded them? Their defensive player of the year candidate. And then he didn't play in the playoffs. And then he came back to the Raptors. Like, this is the stuff that you're gonna write about in the history books.
And then we became better than the next year.
And then we whooped them in the playoffs next year. That would be amazing too. Okay. Can you imagine if you thought the Kyrie thing was bad? Can you imagine how much OG would get booed in New York if that happened?
Imagine the Knicks games next year going to the Garden. RJ, IQ, OG. Oh, oof. Sold out. That's a sold out arena. The stars are going to be there. The biggest names in New York will be booing themselves. You'll have
Yeah.
Fat Joe courtside booing.
No, I agree. Justin Stewart saying, if no OG, who's our second target? Need to do something positive with cap space for once in a lifetime. I think one way to use the cap space would be to park it, like to become a parking spot for somebody else, to use a bad contract and take back some assets, and then worry about that bad contract next off season. So try to trade it as an expiring. So take a 2-year deal back, maybe from a team that's really capped out or pressed up against the cap, and consider trading that expiring and just parking in cap space. The OKC Thunder did this numerous times. They did it with Chris Paul, they did it with Kemba Walker, they did it with Al Horford. I really don't mind. Daniel Franklin saying cat as in, oh wow, Karl-Anthony Towns. That wouldn't be the worst way to use some cap space, especially if you can trade Chris Boucher and Jalen McDaniels or something like that, and Bruce Brown, and then get Karl-Anthony Towns back. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Again, don't really mind taking some young players back from Golden State and using it on Andrew Wiggins either. He helps you next year. He's not the worst player in the world, and shores up some of the stuff that OG would be taking care of. But yeah, I just think Tariq saying Malik Monk is also needed for us. Like, Malik doesn't play defense. He don't play a lick of defense. So honestly, like, Malik plus RJ plus Grady is like a good recipe to get 135 points per game scored on you for every year. So I think, like, I love Malik Monk. It's just he's a luxury maybe you can't afford. John Hamilton saying Cat at 52 million a year, no thanks. Yeah, I mean, but he's not worth he's worth about 35 to 38. 34, 32. I don't know. He's worth north of 30. No matter what you say about him, his skill set mixed with Scotty, if he's bought in, is crazy. Like, what you like in the East, you know what I mean? Like, this is what he's done in the West. He's been an all-star in the West. Like, he would be, I don't know. I went back and forth with someone way back when about Karl-Anthony Towns versus Pascal Siakam, and I chose Karl-Anthony Towns.
Me too.
James saying DeAnthony Melton. I think Melton would be fantastic. Not for an OG-like offer, but maybe a 16, 17 million type of offer, right? Maybe that's overpay for DeAnthony Melton, but I think he shores up a lot of what you need, and he's a really good defender.
Towns took 5.3 threes a game this year and shot about 42% from three. If we get him, I'm pretty sure Darko is going to be like, you're taking like 10 threes a game.
Oh God, yeah, he wanted.
Yeah,
you're to take 10 threes a game. He's gonna tell Karl-Anthony Towns to stand at the fucking half court line and just be like, "This is your new layup line, bro."
He's going to be an above the break merchant, and the offense is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
And John Hamilton saying
Patrick Williams for Brown. I'll puke in my mouth if we trade for Patrick Williams, man. I get that he came a long way last year. I just don't see it. I don't see it. For what he wants, there's a complete delusion in terms of how good that guy thinks he is.
Yeah. No, we're done with the delusions of grandeur, guys. We're done with the Fred VanVleets and Dennis Schroeders. We're done with that.
Maroon Prince saying, if we don't get OG, we need Herb or Caruso. Easier said than done, right? So again, point of attack defenders who can guard 2-3 positions extremely well they're always at a premium, right? Versatility is something I don't think people really fairly factor in. The fact that Scotty Barnes
on top of each other.
Right.
Like, you can have two Carusos on the court and it will work perfectly. That's why they're just the most they're that valuable. You can literally stack them.
Exactly. Like, you consider what the Boston Celtics did, right? Like, I think there is someone needs to do a dissertation or like really do a paper on like how the Celtics succeeded. Consider how many times like imagine one possession you come down the court. Jason Tatum's initiating from the top. Jason Tatum's initiating from the top. Jaylen Brown is on the wing. Derek White is cutting, setting a screen for flare screen for Kristaps Porzingis to pop above the break or whatever. You can, and then the next play down, right? You're starting the entire offense inverted. You're putting it down to Kristaps Porzingis in the post, and suddenly Drew Holiday's up top. And then the next time down, Drew Holiday's in the dunker spot, and Derek White is in the opposite corner. Like, there's no weaknesses, right? Like, you can do it every single way, and that's what versatility I'm talking about. Jason Tatum, when Kristaps Porzingis went out, Jason Tatum was able to play fucking center for them in a small ball lineup because he's a huge human being. And you got Jaylen Brown hounding point guards 94 feet because he's versatile too. Like, people don't understand that Scotty and OG are like, they are like, those are the two players I would have never
Yeah,
parted in a
they're
million
the
years.
Tatum Brown. They're the Tatum Brown archetypes in terms of
Defensively,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
because like you could put them anywhere. You could okay, like I can tell you right now, next
They're
year
not a
there's gonna be
big. They're not a guard. They're not a wing. They're everything.
exactly like you could start these guys at 1-2 and not get killed because they have started at 1-2 and not getting killed. They could also start at 4-5. Like that's
Like,
crazy to me, and they wouldn't get killed there either.
and
Like
if
they
you
are
think
just
about it,
big, strong wings. Like the OG Anunoby represents the essence of what Masai Ujiri loves in a basketball player. Like everything about OG, from the community stuff to the giving back to the humble, mild mannered guy to the basketball stuff to the Nigerian roots to the British stuff to the business minded entrepreneurship stuff. Like people don't understand how much Masai Ujiri loved OG. So again, unless OG really wanted to leave, there's no way the Raptors are going to trade him. And obviously, they went and there was a particular quote, and this was like I want to say like a couple days after the OG thing, came out, and I can't remember exactly who told me this, but they said, the Raptors are asking, um, they said the Raptors are asking Scotty Barnes to just have a little faith and a little patience and to trust them that this is going to work out fine. And the minute I heard that, I started thinking, there's a bigger plan here. You got Bobby Webster. Okay, Bobby Webster is the cap genius. Okay, every contract, every move, every trade has been structured with this end in mind, in my opinion. Even if you think about the trading of the OKC pick, right? Like just again, everything is just projecting, shuffling a million here to get this under and that under to be able to leverage this single opportunity, right? It reminds me of those plants that you like water and water and water and they literally bloom for like I think like 12 minutes or something. There is like a plant, and that's what this cap space is. You made so many moves last year to give yourself like a window of opportunity that will last maximum a week, and then it's gone. And I really hope that all of this was not for naught. And if it's not OG, then really I hope it is something. I hope it's Nick Claxton or Isaiah Hartenstein or D'Anthony Melton, because I hope the least likely and probably like the most unfavorable, disfavorable, most hated outcome for me would be, oh, we're gonna roll the can down with Gary and Bruce Brown. Like that would be so disheartening
oh,
and so fucking
barf,
stupid.
barf.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
going back to the Celtics and the future of basketball, it's like when you think about it, it's so strange that Brown and Tatum there's so much overlap. I mean, in this simple explanation, they're almost the same player. And Holiday and White are almost the same player, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it works perfectly because you can stack that 5 times and it would work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
that's
mean
why
I mean,
Siakam.
honestly, like I think like the reason that I really like the OG inclusion now more so than I liked it before, and I think he'll be better this time around with the Raptors than he was in the previous times, is because you actually do have some diversity in your lineup. Like this Emmanuel Quickly, deep shooting, RJ Barrett, rim pressure.
Yeah,
These players just didn't exist on your roster. Like Grady Dick, movement shooter, Ochai, like no Ochai, maybe not so much, but Kelly Olynyk as a stretch big, Jakob Pertl as a roll big. These player archetypes, when we were talking about OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, working off of fucking Kem Birch, these just didn't exist.
free throw line
Thaddeus Young,
floaters.
Kem Birch, Chris Boucher. This we just homogenized. Like there's so much overlapping redundancy with these players, and sometimes it really does help. Like you might say, hey, like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum are very similar players, but they're also very different players, right? Like where Tatum can take it into the post, Brown can be more of a slasher, more of a quick twitch guy. The same guy who can stop one is going to struggle with the other. Drew Holiday versus Derek White, right? Like, yeah, they do a lot of the same stuff defensively, but offensively, they present very different, and even defensively, they match up with very different types of players. And then you have Al Horford versus Kristaps Porzingis. Like the guy who's going to stop one is not necessarily going to stop the other. You know what I mean? So
But
there
if we
is
get
like,
OG, but if we get OG, there's a lot. Our top four versus their top four, we have way more versatility and
who's
way
say?
less overlap.
Who's
Like
they?
IQ, RJ, OG, Scotty has way less overlap, and there's way more unique skill sets
Than
than what
Boston's?
Boston has. Because Boston, they're closer together than the Raptors four would be. Because IQ and
Mm,
RJ don't play the same at all, and that would be the backcourt. Like they don't play the same at all. Whereas White and Holiday play a lot closer in terms of skill set. And
yeah.
RJ and uh, Tatum and Brown are a lot closer than Scotty and OG would be. Like they're not even close in terms of what they present offensively, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, look, there's, something to be said for, um, knowing, right? Like, having that knowledge of knowing how a guy fits into your system because you've already seen it, right? Like, we've seen it before where the Raptors flirt with a guy and then they sign him to a bigger deal, right? We saw it with Rafer Alston, for instance. They brought him in and then they signed him to a big deal, right? We saw it with Ken Birch. They brought him in a flyer and then because they liked what they saw, they sampled it, right? Sometimes the Raptors do this, right? And had Jonte Porter kept his nose clean, I'm sure he would have gotten a really lucrative offer this offseason. Unfortunately for him, he won't, and he's banned. I think with OG, you have so much data that you just don't have with other players. Like I can guess what Paul George would look like in this, I can guess what D'Anthony Melton will look like, but I don't know. I don't know how he's going to mesh with my head coaches. I don't know how he's going to mesh in this city. I don't know how he's going to mesh with my star player. With Scotty, I already know with OG, like I already know how this guy fits in. And of course, hypothesis has to be made and guesses have to be made in terms of how he fits in with IQ and RJ because he was never playing with those guys. But I've already seen this guy in my system. I already understand him as a person and what he wants to do as a basketball player. That additional intel has to matter. This is why so often you see guys, you see teams drafting guys who went to college in their home city, or their home state. You see guys drafting guys who are their hometown heroes, like Derrick Rose going to Chicago, whatever. It's just because you have more knowledge about that person, and tends to be that the more knowledge you have, the surer you are about what you're doing. With OG, there's no team in the league that has a better intel or a better grasp on what OG is going to be in the next 5 years through the life of this contract, right?
Uh,
Do you have
um,
the same intel on Ben Simmons? You have the same intel on Domantas Sabonis? No, you
no.
don't, right? So that's where I say like the Raptors, if the Raptors end up paying 38 million, it's because he was worth 35, you know? But they got to find a way to clear up some extra dollars if he wants those extra dollars. I don't want, like, oh, we had to keep the 19th overall pick. Like, no, lose the 19th pick. If it means getting OG back, I don't give a shit what you have to lose. Just lose it, you know? And also when I was looking at the cap sheet, there's a 4 million or $5 million for like minimum charge, like roster charge. I was looking at the article by Blake Murphy. So I don't know if that's like a temp hold because obviously that money does not assign to any particular player. So I believe that the Raptors will have like they can realistically clear up 35 to 36 million without even trading anybody. I believe that is the truth, but I will look further into that. But the Raptors are very close to OG territory, and I just think that's a remarkable coincidence, given the fact that at various times throughout the past year they could have made it so that this was not possible.
So right now the Knicks can negotiate with OG.
Yes, they can negotiate, but they cannot announce, they cannot sign. So they can just talk. They can talk without they can even agree, but they can't sign and they can't announce it, they can't sign it.
Okay, so theoretically they could have agreed.
Yeah, they could have agreed. Which makes the report coming out that he's going to test free agency absolutely nonsensical, right? So devil's advocate here, OG really wants to play in New York, but he wants the max dollar. Okay. First of all, he's never struck me as a super greedy guy. Um, there's something to be said about the context of the team. You know, he could be like, hey, fuck it. I've been underpaid my whole career. I'm a really good player. This is my last big contract. I want the max bag. That does not strike me as an OG type of thing. It strikes me as like, money is going to be a part of the situation. It's not going to be the whole situation. And obviously, like he cares about winning. He cares about role. He cares about all these
He
things. He
learned
cares
from Fred
about
and
his
Pascal.
teammates,
He learned
right?
from his vets.
Hmm?
I said he learned from his vets, Fred and Pascal.
Yeah, I'm sure watching those guys gun for contracts probably wasn't the best thing for him. But what I'm saying is that ultimately he can demand whatever the hell he wants, but it would be hard for me to imagine that he would put his own team, especially if he's invested in being there long term, especially because, hey, like, you don't think Jalen Brunson knows that OG taking like 30 million, especially if that was agreed upon before, like, oh, I'm gonna come in and like again, the way this whole thing was presented was like OG communicated to his agent that he really, really wanted to be in New York and that he was willing to sign for less to stay there. And the Knicks said, okay, we're gonna trade for you and make this happen, right? The way it was communicated was that. Now, if he is reneging, or if that never happened, or if he changed his mind or whatever, then ultimately you're already in really bad books with your own team because you are fucking up their entire situation. You can't just
Yeah.
throw an extra 10 million at a guy because he changes his mind. It changes the entire course trajectory of your entire team building philosophy. Like suddenly you don't have the money to sign Isaiah Hartenstein. You know what I mean? So now
Yep.
you didn't lose RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly for OG Anunoby. You lost 3 key rotation players, including 2 starters for OG Anunoby. That's a very different equation. And I think at some point you do have to ask yourself, like, flip it. If you're a Raptor fan, just flip it right now, right? Let's just say Emmanuel quickly was on a second contract right now, and you had heard rumors that IQ really, really just wants to come to Toronto. And the Raptors are like super, super, cap conscious and team building conscious. And they're like, hey, he's in this really shit situation in New York. He hates it, but if he can just get to Toronto, he'll sign on the dotted line for 25 million. The Raptors like, yes, and they trade everything to get him. And then he comes here, and then we start hearing rumors that he wants 40. You know what I mean? Like now you're feeling like, whoa, what changed? What happened? Like we traded for you on the assumption that we get you at 25, but now you want 40. Now we have to get rid of stuff to sign you back. Now he has them by the balls. And frankly, there's never a situation where a negotiation like that is going to make you favorable in the locker room because everybody else took pay cuts. Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and Jalen Brunson to play together, they took a pay cut, right? Isaiah Hartenstein took less money to be there, right? A lot of these guys are taking less money. So when that's the culture, that everyone's hooked up with CAA and everyone's taking less money, and you come in and you demand the boat, you demand the max, and you start leveraging and squeezing, 7 different offers against them. I'm sorry, the human element of this is you're going to be a pariah in that locker room.
So when he joins our team, we just up security when we go to New York. It's triple security.
I will personally
load a bag on security. Blow a bag.
I will personally volunteer to be OG
Presidential security.
Personal security. I will run personal security for OG Anunoby when he goes to New York. Yeah. Anyways, man, any final thoughts?
Yeah, man, free agency, man. It's under 2 weeks. It's under 2 weeks. I'm just watching some WNBA to hold me down for the Olympics. It's gonna be a great summer, bro. It's gonna be a great summer. I'm just so happy. The ghosts of championship past have faded away, and we are sailing away into the future. You know what I mean? In a new era of Raptors basketball. It's just beautiful. Canada basketball, free agency, WNBA. Great time to be alive, bro.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And if the Toronto Raptors decline Bruce Brown and let him walk, it's going to be the most panicked I've ever seen Knicks fans in a really long time.
Oh wow.
Like,
Yeah.
and Justin Sear saying NBA draft is 8 days away. Yes, it is, and we got to drop our mock draft really soon. We got to talk about some of these players and stuff. We'll do that tomorrow, I promise. Now that the NBA playoffs are done, the season has been wrapped, awards have been done. We got to talk draft, and I've been listening to so much, watching so much. I have like a really good grasp on this draft. Like I really do. Like this year's draft, I'm like, okay, like 80% solid that I know my shit when it comes to this draft. There's still a couple of players that I do want to do a little bit more of a comprehensive rise on. And the truth is, like, a mock draft is not complete unless you know all 70 to 85 guys that can get drafted. You can't, because if you really, really love a guy and you haven't seen him, like, he might go first round for you and you're just like, oh, well, he's a 60th pick. I don't want to. No, I need to do a little bit more film. So I'm going to do that. And then hopefully we get something out tomorrow. But yeah.
All right, man. Zach Edey, Brooke Lopez, yes or no? Should that be his goal? Should that be the guy he watches?
Mm,
Because if Zach Edey can shoot above the break threes, whew, that's a game changer.
yeah, I don't know. Apparently, every big has shooting upside, right? Um,
Yeah.
Jordan, right here. Jesus Christ, give up the OG stuff already, man. You're the only person with a podcast that's ever even discussed this. Cap, not true. But I was the first. So give credit where credit's due. He's not coming back. LMAO. This is getting sad at this point, brother. Mm. Okay. Let's see. I don't think you're right. It's worth discussing because it's a real report that came out from Brian Windhorst that said OG is not happy. Jake Fisher has echoed the same sentiments. There are about 80 different people that I could reference you to that are closer to the situation than you or I are that would absolutely agree that things are not going super smoothly with OG Anunoby in New York. Now, you can still think that New York is a favorite, and I still think New York is a favorite to sign him. But don't dismiss the idea that Toronto can be a real boogeyman in the situation and have a legit shot. They do. They have a legit shot.
And if I'm OG, I'm not taking a pay cut to play with Julius Randle.
Mm,
I'm not.
yeah, me neither. Yeah, and can't stand them folks. Jordan is right. Give it up. He wanted a bigger role, so why would he entertain coming back? Give it a rest already. Because he had a smaller role in New York.
He really did. He really did. And the guys he was not in favor with, they're not here anymore.
Exactly.
The guys he had an issue with, the type of offense that was being played, that's not an issue anymore. They're gone.
Yeah. Exactly. Anyways, man, peace. Thanks a lot. Nice talking to you again. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna look forward to more draft coverage. Yeah. All right. Peace, man. Yeah.
Later.
Okay. Knicks fans be all up in their feelings. They just can't imagine that somebody would not want to Daniel Franklin saying Topic at 19, Mogbo at 31. That would be crazy. Can't be overrating motherfuckers out here. Um, I'd love OG back, but man, how much better are we with him? Scotty and OG couldn't even run a fast break together. No, I think they're a lot better with him. Can't be overrating motherfuckers around here anymore. Gonna end up with Pascal back here. That ship has very, very, very firmly sailed. Like, you'll notice, I mean, granted, you can say it's a peculiarity of his personality, but OG didn't really issue much of a bye-bye to Toronto either, right? There was no outpouring, there was no, "Oh my god," there's nothing. It was just, "See ya," you know? Um, again, I don't I say this kindly, Scotty's a very smart guy, okay? Like, when he says, "Yeah, OG and I have been talking a lot lately," like, yo, like, look, I'll say it again just to reiterate my points so that nobody comes back to me when he signs with Philly or New York and says, "You're an idiot. I told you you're wrong." The best case scenario is Toronto gets OG at a reasonable contract. The worst case scenario in here is you make it harder for a division rival to sign their player back and therefore make it harder for them to build a team. Look, at some point, the Toronto Raptors are going to contend. We talked about it yesterday. We talked about it the day before, whatever. We talked about it every single day this offseason, pretty much. We've done a live. You're building towards the future. And this is a zero-sum game. The game you win is a game someone else is losing. If you're gonna ever win a championship, it means you're gonna have to be better than New York. It means you're gonna have to be better than Boston. You're gonna have to be better than teams in your division at least, and especially the teams in your conference, and eventually the teams across the league. So it is to your benefit, especially given your very strained and very bad relationship with the New York Knicks, to make this process very difficult for them. Okay. And if that means that you are going to present, the proverbial boogeyman at, I mean, how many times have we seen this happen in the past? I believe, what was it? Brian Colangelo did this for the Knicks, right? So the Knicks were the boogeyman to sign Steve Nash. The Raptors go out, they signed Landry Fields. If I'm not mistaken, Landry Fields was, to screw over the Knicks. And then what ends up happening is, Steve Nash decides to spurn both offers and ends up going to the Lakers, right? I'm saying teams do this shit sometimes. Okay, especially if the two front offices are not really vibing with each other. So in the end, I would much prefer that the player that I really like in this situation, OG, is going to get paid as much money. And if I'm going to create videos and create enough of a kerfuffle on the internet that there's a chance, because again, you have to generate interest. He has to be open for the offers to come and for leverage to exist. Teams have to believe that he's worth pursuing. And OG Anunoby is willing to test free agency because he's not happy with the Knicks offer. The news coming on June 18th, which is a good 2 weeks plus removed from when the Knicks can officially make that offer. Look, don't be surprised in the end if he does go back to the Knicks. But what I would be surprised by is if he goes back at a significant discount, which is what was originally reported. When OG Anunoby came out, and again, I think it's really worth asking at this point, who are you smoke screening? He's represented by CAA. Nick is like, the Knicks are run by CAA basically. So who are you smoke screening here? Who are you bluffing? Who is against who here? It seems like a person who's trying to extract a negotiation with their right arm from their left arm. You know what I mean? Like, and there's the conflict of interest, right? Look, I think athletes are considered pretty stupid by agencies, and I've seen it myself quite a few times where agents, when they talk about athletes, they talk about them like they're really dumb people. OG Anunoby is an exceptionally intelligent person. Like I would say he's intelligent not for an athlete. I think he's intelligent for a doctor. Okay. And if you've ever listened to this guy talk about anything, like you understand, like this guy has some serious problem solving intelligence. Like he is smart. There are probably like 20 players in the NBA that I think are really, really, really like I don't want to say book smart, but like smart, smart. Like they're problem solving smart. Like they're grandmaster chess smart. Luca's super smart. There are guys like this. OG is one of those guys where he's super smart. So he's not about to get played like an idiot here. Like he's not your I don't want to say typical athlete because it's kind of derogatory and it's making light of athletes being, but I think a lot of athletes maybe due to the fact that they have specialized in sport as opposed to things, they leave these things to their agent. Sometimes they get played. Vince Carter, he got played. Vince was a super smart guy, very, intuitively very smart guy, but he got played by an agent. It happens, right? So I think that, there's a predatory nature of agencies and players sometimes. And maybe they thought OG was a dummy. Maybe thought OG is really just licking his chops to come to New York for all the marketing opportunities. And it's like, hey man, this is a businessman. This is an entrepreneur. This is his preneur. And he's gonna leverage his options like any good capitalist would in that situation. Any smart person would, right? Anyways, um, yes. If the Raptors were to get Edie, who would you still have to be on the board to make you upset with the Edie pick? Misi, Carrington. There's so many players. There's 304 people in here. I'm assuming a lot of you are Raptor fans. Should I just do like a brief, foray into the draft just to give you like a 15-minute roundup to close this out? I'll give you a few thoughts on the draft. I don't like veering into a complete off topic because I feel bad for people who are here for the OG talk and then we're talking draft. But I assume a lot of you are Raptors fans or at least fans who are vested in the draft. So I can share a little bit of my thoughts on this. I think the top of this draft is really interesting in that I do think there are some all stars there. It's just not very clear who those players are going to be. I think Zachary Risachet is a very interesting player that I would probably, have been very excited to draft at the very top. I think Ron Holland is a guy who's going to slip, and Cody Williams, and guys like, for instance, Rob Dillingham, Modest Bazelis. Like there are guys who could very easily be number 3, and there could very easily be number 12. And at 3, maybe it's a reach, and at 12, maybe it's a steal, right? I do look at last year's draft. I look at players like in the last 5 years who've been drafted, and I start asking myself, is Walker Kessler a better pro prospect than Donovan Clingan? I have to ask myself, what do the numbers tell me on that, right? The numbers tell me they're really close, but Walker had the clearer bill of health, and Donovan Clingan is a 7'2" guy who's had foot injury history. And it also tells me that Walker Kessler was borderline considered a second round pick before the Jazz picked him in the 20s 2 years ago, 3 years ago. and Walker and Donovan Clingan is being considered a first overall pick potentially to Atlanta. That's very weird to me. That if nothing else, that illustrates to me just how weak this draft really is at the very top, right? There is going to be someone who's going to fall for sure, but I'm starting to feel now more than ever that the Toronto Raptors are just in a beautiful place at 19 and 31. Like they're going to get something really good in terms of like a role player that people are devaluing. And just because there isn't that superstar upside. Now, I look at a guy like Alex Sarr. I really have been firm on this since the beginning, and I'll be happy to be proven wrong that I'm not really a big Alex Sarr guy. I've seen him too many times, the OTE, and it's just giving me a lot of Yi Jiang Liang vibes. And I'm not saying that to say like he's going to be Yi Jiang Liang, but I'm saying like a lot of the when you see it in a private workout, it looks great, but when you see it 5-on-5, it doesn't really match up. It's the same thing with Khalil Ware. So in terms of the ED stuff, I gotta say, like I go back and forth every single day on Zach Edey. Every day, I'm like, I wake up and I feel a little bit differently. On the one hand, I think he's a super tough guy, and I think he's going to find a way to be successful and find a way to stick around in the league for like 8 years. On the other hand, I know there's going to be series where he's just going to be unplayable. So if you're cool with that, if you're cool with him being your second string center and an alternate in your lineup, and he's cool with understanding that, look, I watched the Boston Celtics versus the Dallas Mavericks yesterday, and I watched PJ Washington fail to rotate. And PJ Washington's a much better defender in terms of a perimeter defender than Zach Edey is ever going to be. And I watched the Celtics spam the Mavericks for 9 straight points. I watched Kristaps Porzingis, granted a little bit compromised injury wise, right? And I watched the Mavericks get 3 upon 3 upon 3 and basically come back into the game in the first quarter because Kristaps Porzingis was on the court. Look, man, this Celtics thing that's happening is not just the Celtics. There are plenty of teams that are going to be able to stretch you out this way and put 5 guys on the court. And while there's probably some part of you that's just like, yeah, but they can't handle Zach Edey either. Well, you're not going to be successful running an offense through Zach Edey in 2024 or 2025. So he's going to have to show me that he can defend. But the more I watch him, the more I'm like, I'll probably still pick him, but it's only because I can't I can't sell myself on anybody else. Like we're getting guys like Johnny Furphy being talked about as potential lottery picks. Now, I may come back to regret this, but I don't think Johnny Furphy is a first rounder next year. And I don't think Johnny Furphy was a first rounder last year. I don't think he's better than Grady Dick. I don't think he's better than Christian Brown. I don't think he's better than Ochai Bosh. I really think that he has some significant holes in his game. But because the lack of upside and so many prospects in this draft, you're having guys like Nikola Topic going to the number 1 spot in this draft earlier in the cycle. You're having guys like Alex Sarr being talked about like they're much better than they really are. The truth is, Alex Sarr and Leonard Miller are not that far apart. Like, if you really watch them play, they're not that far apart. Like, yeah, Alex Sarr is the better prospect. Yeah, he has theoretically the better upside. But Leonard Miller was a second round pick last year. And I'm not saying that's gospel. I get it. He could have been a first round pick. He slipped a little bit. What about a guy like Cam Whitmore? What about a guy like Keontae George? Where would those guys go in this year's draft? And Anthony Black. I think an Anthony Black would probably be the number 1 pick in this year's draft. There's like 12 guys in last year's draft that would be solidly in the running for number 1 pick this year. So that's why I say, like, I think people assign too much value to the not knowing part of the draft. And if you know for sure that there is a player at 7, 8, 9 who's slipping and you believe in him the way you believed in Giannis, way you believed in Shea, great. Buy low on that pick. Find something, zig while other people zag. But the average player picked between 1 and 20 is just going to be horrible in this draft. They're going to be a role player, and that's just, it's going to be a very low upside draft, in my opinion. And if there are going to be a couple all stars, I would put just as much money that one of those all stars is picked in the 20s as I would that they're picked in the top 10. There's going to be stars everywhere. The Raptors have 2 really great opportunities to get that, potential player. And don't be surprised if it's like not a player that you're expecting. Like, don't be surprised if it's like your Herb Jones type. But like Herb Jones, that's the type of player that falls to a second round pick in a good draft. But in this year's draft, Peyton Watson, Brandon Pajimski, those are lottery picks, right? So that's where I was like, if you're the Toronto Raptors and there's a whole bunch of teams ahead of you that are just like really, really not wanting to pay for a lottery pick, like a 13th pick or whatever, if the Kings are being super cap conscious, that's why I would trade up. People's big board very wildly in the draft makes it all interesting. I'll agree with that, and again, it's one of my rules for the draft is that divergence in terms of thought process creates transactions, right? So you're gonna have somebody out there who's gonna see Zachary Risache as Trey Murphy the third plus, or a Michael Porter Jr. plus, right? And they're gonna sell themselves in the idea that that's a real legit first overall pick, and they're gonna trade, they're gonna be willing to trade some serious value to get that player into their gym. And then you're gonna have somebody out there who's gonna see him like an Usman Jang plus, right? And I know he's much better than Usman Jang, but you get my drift, right? So I don't know. I think the Raptors are sitting fine. If they get OG and they get one of these picks to work, I mean, you are in a really great. And yes, like we've talked about it, and we kind of glossed over the fact that yes, in order to make this OG thing work, you are going to have to renounce Bruce Brown, Gary Trent Jr. Well, guess what? I trade 2 Garys and 5 Bruce Browns to get 1 OG because that's what the Celtics have taught me about team building. When you consider how the Boston Celtics became the Boston Celtics, it was constant consolidation, multiple picks, multiple young players for one player, constant consolidation. And this is why we talk about winning on the margins. This is why we talk about hitting on those second round picks, late first round picks. If Malachi Flynn and Precious Achua had been of anything of consequence, you would have gotten a hell of a lot back than just RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly. You could have potentially gotten back 2 firsts, right? If Emmanuel Quickly hadn't blossomed in New York, if he hadn't come through, Kentucky, he's a tossin in this deal. You know what I mean? So Collier is going to fall to 19, former number one prospect. There's about 6 players that realistically could fall to 19. Johnny Furphy could fall. Again, not super high on him, but I understand the upside. Yves Misi could fall. Daron Holmes could fall. Isaiah Collier could fall. Zach Edey could fall. I mean, some people consider that not a fall, but he's there. Nikola Topic could be a very outlandish, player to fall. And again, stranger things have happened, but him not measuring well, plus the injury, plus the language barrier. Again, you don't know. Like maybe someone's pushing him towards Toronto. Khalil Ware could fall. I don't know how he's interviewing, but I doubt it's. I'm definitely not saying that, but Tyler Smith and Deron Holmes certainly fit the bill. Um, in terms of what the Raptors need. But I look, here's the thing. All I want from this draft for the Toronto Raptors is athleticism. That's what I really, really want. You know what I mean? Like that's what I want for the Toronto Raptors. I want the Raptors to get way more athletic in this year's draft. And that's Yves Misi, man. That is Yves Misi. That is that guy. Okay. I need athletes. I need athletes around Scotty. I need athletes around IQ and RJ, right? Like I want transition terrors. I want guys who cut fast. I want guys who can blitz up the court and put pressure because again, with Kelly Olynyk, with Grady Dick being a somewhat functional, but not greatest athlete, RJ Barrett's not the greatest athlete. Scotty Barnes is a good, very good athlete. You're kind of lacking that pop athlete, You can make a case that maybe Ochai Abaji is like the most explosive athlete on your team. I think you need a little bit more of that on your team, right? You need a little bit of pop. You need a little bit of slashing. You need a little bit of burst and first step, right? Guys who can just get past their guy. A Markel Fultz is a great example of a guy who's got athleticism and shiftiness. Jalen Brown is another example, right? So I would just like an athlete of that mold. And maybe that athlete is Ron Holland, right? Maybe that athlete is someone like that. Maybe it's Yves Misi. Man, I know this will never happen, but could you imagine at 19 you get Ron Holland and at 31 you got Yves Misi because they both just fell off draft boards and the draft went super crazy and we're getting like guys that we were picking in the 60s going in the lottery. Nothing would surprise me about this draft at all. Whoa. HJMT Holdings. with a huge super chat here saying, "Keep up the grind." Man, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And you know you're loaded because you got holdings at the end of it. Appreciate that. um, Penny Hardaway with the ease me see baby. Um, yeah. Castle will be an all-star. Again, John, it's interesting. You're a community member here, and I really appreciate, that you always tune into these lives. Lately, I've been reading your comments, and I disagree vehemently with a lot of stuff you're saying. So maybe this is something where you can call in one day and we can hash it out, like have a disagreement or an agreement about how you see these players and maybe how you see some of these young players. But truth be told, man, every year you hear this stuff about these prospects, and subconsciously there's an idea that you know this is going to no I think look, Stephon Castle is going to be good in my opinion. He's going to be really good, right? But when people say will be an all-star, I have to say, like, in a normal draft, Stephon Castle is a mid first round pick. I just want to be clear about that. In a normal draft, Stephon Castle is not anywhere near, I'm gonna say he's not that much better a prospect than Moses Moody, who went 14th. He's definitely not a better prospect than Franz Wagner, who went 8th in 2001. So, like, was Moses Moody a definite all-star? Hell no. But there's no definite all-stars in this draft. I promise you, if he was a definite all-star, he's probably going first overall, and it's not even a question. So, yeah, I don't know if I feel like it's a leverage thing. What's a leverage thing? The OG thing? Again, leverage against what and leverage against who, right? I've already outlined it. It's really awkward and weird if this hasn't already been laid out. You have to understand this whole process is supposed to be super smooth with them, right? Clutch Tatum saying, "Imagine losing Emmanuel quickly, RJ, and the second round pick for nothing." Well, exactly. But I mean, they did make a deep playoff run. Granted, they didn't win a championship with OG, and granted, OG was not healthy. But didn't the Toronto Raptors trade away DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a first round pick to get Kawhi, only to see him walk a year later? Well, now the Knicks know how it feels to lose a guy after nothing. And didn't the Raptors last year have a gun to their head with Jakob Poeltl potentially, about to leave for nothing when they'd given 3 picks and to get him? Yeah, they could have lost Jakob for jack shit. They could have lost Jakob for nothing. They had to overpay Jakob last summer when they didn't get Fred. And actually, like, had they gotten Fred, I think Jakob would have taken a little bit less. I think that was the agreement where when they lost Fred, Jakob was like, "All right, you're paying me more money." But he had the Raptors by the balls. Imagine the PR hit. Oh, you not only got Fred VanVleet paid, not only do you not match that offer to him, you also traded away 3 picks and you got absolutely nothing back, and the guy just left. And he was actually a guy that was a homegrown talent for you. My God, the PR nightmare that would have been Jakob Poeltl going back to San Antonio. Well, you know what? OG Anunoby coming back to the Raptors is even a worse PR nightmare for the Knicks. Given the Knicks, the whole lawsuit situation, I think that would be even worse. I mean, we won a championship. Yeah, sure. And the Knicks made a conference finals. No, they didn't make a conference finals. My bad. They made a conference semifinals. Wow. Yeah. Anyway, watch for Utah OG. They want to compete. I don't see OG going to Utah of all markets. I could be wrong. And Danny Ainge is a fantastic guy, and in terms of just an executive, and he's built this incredible roster. And maybe OG fits in with that, right? They've got guards, they got Keontae George, they got Colin Sexton, they got Taylor Hendricks on the come up, and he was really good at the end of the last year. And then they've got Laurie Markkinen. So maybe, and they've got a young coach that is really going to woo OG. I think Will Hardy would really get along with OG. I think that's a great situation for him. I just don't think it's the right market or the right city for OG. Indiana is also, a team that has been floated around, and could they make it happen? Would they make it happen, etc. But I don't, I don't think so. No, I think the Raptors should be considered like a top 4, top 5 type of situation for OG. And I think because of the Scotty connection, I think especially if you can make a case that he really had a good time here with Darko, like he had about 40 games to really understand the current coaching staff, right? And how much they deviated from the previous coaching staff. And I thought he got better. I thought they worked with him hard. I thought Darko established a really good roots with him. So if those relationships can be leveraged forward, if he believes that he can be used more to his liking, if you believe he should be used more to his liking, then I think definitely this is a great situation for the Raptors. Anyway, I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. And I want to remind you guys that on draft night, we are going to be streaming live. It is going to be lit. So come hang out with hundreds, possibly the thousand plus. I don't know. We'll see. Raptors fans, as we together have a collective meltdown as the Raptors basically draft some guy that we've never heard of in our entire lives at number 19. And you see me lose my mind for what feels like the 800th time in the Masai Ujiri era. Um, love this time for lives. Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. This has been really fun. So I want to thank you guys so much. And again, I want to give another shout out to the people who have contributed to our Amazon gift list stuff, and to the people who've been sending e-transfers, the people who are doing super chats. Super cool. But if you can't do any of that stuff, I really appreciate it. Just hit like on the video. There's 288 people, and I bet you any amount of money there's not 288 likes on this video. So even if half of you are hate watching it, can we get this video up to 144 likes? Like this video if you want OG to come back. Let's get this video up to 1,000 likes. All right. Every single time I make a video about OG coming back to Toronto, and yes, I have made 4. I think I've made 3 or 4 videos about this. Starting back 5 months ago in terms of when I laid it out, you can go watch that, to now. Every time I have, there's always a double meaning to it. There's always a double reason for it. On the one hand, yes, I think it's possible. On the other hand, I really think the Knicks fans deserve a little bit of this for all the gloating they had. And I really don't like a lot of the Knicks fans and how they talk about RJ Barrett. I gotta be honest. I really don't. The way they talk about that guy, like he didn't care about basketball, that he cheated money, he stole money from them. The narrative around RJ in New York has always pissed me off so bad that I almost feel like I want him to get his vengeance against them too. So yeah, this is personal, with the Knicks and the Raptors, the front offices, the ownership groups. This is very personal. And this would feel like justice. This would feel like vindication. This would feel like it would make me feel a lot better to get OG back given everything we've been through as a fan base the last 2 years. Yeah. So that's why I want it to happen. But yeah. All right. Talk to y'all later. Peace. Have a great night and enjoy the heat. Or don't enjoy the heat. Or get, I hope you stay cool and stay healthy. And make sure to take care of your pets if you have pets. Like it's super hot for them. We got my dog hanging out in front of the air conditioner right now. All right. Peace.